It only takes one witness to spoil the perfect movie. Let's talk about Rear Window.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. We are back. I have the Storm podcast. Danny G, please do your thing.
So, this is Have You Seen, in which we talk about a movie that some of us know well and others have just seen for the first time. This week, we are talking about Rear Window, which is a 1954 mystery thriller movie directed by Alfred Hitchcock, which has the reputation of being one of the best movies ever made, and certainly one of the best movies Alfred Hitchcock has ever made. It follows the story of Jeff Jeffries, who is a photojournalist who is trapped in a New York apartment during a heat wave as he's recovering from a broken leg. While he's stuck in this apartment, his only entertainment is watching through his back window into a courtyard where he watches the lives of all his neighbors, which starts out as kind of a game, but then he comes to believe that he has witnessed his neighbor kill his wife. And the police will not believe him. And so he teams up with his girlfriend and his nurse to get to the bottom of this and solve the mystery. So, what did you guys think of Rear Window?
I will say it is a commendable film, but it is a film that is not for me. Definitely commendable that it was shot in one scene and the way that it was shot. I was like, yo, this is a pretty cool idea. It feels like we're watching with him, even though he was like stalking in a way. There was more ambiguity when it comes to that. But that being said, it was commendable the way that it was shot and still kind of like creating a story from that and just like I said, it felt like we were watching people with him, if that makes sense. However, I think it was just too much of a slow burn. I think like the first 45 minutes, it was very slow. And I think throughout it was, and I still have, I wouldn't call it a pet peeve, but a lot of the times with these kind of like old movies, when I say old, I'll probably say anything before the 80s. The acting feels very, I don't know how to explain it, but the way that they just say certain lines, it just feels very old in comparison to the movies now, if that makes sense. You could tell when a film is an old film, even if I guarantee that even if a film was shot in HD, the acting, I'll be able to kind of like differentiate a film that was shot now and shot back in the day by just hearing the way that the dialogue is being said. So with this film, I think I have an issue with that, and I find it kind of hard to connect with. Yeah, so it was a mixture of it being a slow burn and also with just the way that they're saying their lines.
Normally, when you say old movies, you mean before 2000, and this is from 1954.
Yeah, yeah. But what I say, but I don't have issues. Like I've watched movies from the 80s and 90s that I really, really like. But I think anything before that is kind of. When was The Exorcist out?
It's 60s. So, just for the record, this is the second oldest movie we've talked about. Only The Wizard of Oz from 1939 is older.
Damn, that came out in 1939. Okay.
Wait, when did the Dinner for One come out?
60 something, 64. So, yeah, second oldest.
But yeah, like I said, it's definitely a commendable film. And actually, because I want to be a filmmaker, I actually took tips from that film as well. So, like I said, it's a commendable film. And I think as a filmmaker, especially a filmmaker of low budget, I'll say definitely watch this for educational purposes.
So, you think you had a thing or two to learn from Alfred Hitchcock?
From what?
Alfred Hitchcock.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
I think I kind of feel a little bit similar to you in the sense that I can see the appeal of the film, and I can definitely see the film's qualities, and it definitely has good moments, but it kind of took too long to get to the point. Like what this is about, like an hour and 50 minutes or so. You could have cut about like 15, 20 minutes out of this. I just kind of felt like we were like they set up the premise well, but then they set the premise up too well, where they were kind of like hammering home certain things, or like sort of kind of overemphasizing, and it just felt like it dragged for the first like 45 minutes, where I was like, okay, can we get to like the reason that we're here, and like that the actual point of it. And I will say, like, once it did pick up a little bit, and it was sort of interesting, and it was kind of sort of fascinating to try and kind of piece together this like mystery with them as they were constantly checking. And I like the way that, like, at first people were like unconvinced, and then they sort of kind of came to be convinced as they were kind of like presented with the facts as well. I will say, when I got to the end of it, I don't know whether I would have enjoyed it more if he'd like just like misunderstood everything that he'd been seeing, where like you can like kind of judge something from afar and just like get it completely wrong. But I guess obviously this has like this like kind of thriller horror element to it, so it needed to have been true. But it would have been like interesting and it could have been like, something there. They kind of like tie up everyone's like kind of stories as well, the same, like with the other women that he was like watching, the one that was like lonely, or like the lonely girl that they called her and whatever. I think they could have gone a little bit darker with that one, and I think I would have appreciated that as well. Honestly, this is one where it was, I wouldn't say tough to get through, but it kind of felt a little bit like a chore after a while, where it was just a bit like, okay, I kind of get it, I understand it. I'm unsure if it's doing anything super impressive for me. Yeah, it was just kind of was whatever by the end of the movie.
So you guys are dissenting from the consensus that gives this 99% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Yes, we are falling in line with you. No, but when I say that, if it was like a thumbs up, thumbs down, like Rotten Tomato is, then it would be a thumbs up. Yeah, overall, like I enjoy the movie, but I still take, some issues with things like the length of the movie, the sort of kind of appeal and like the long-term appeal of like the premise that they had over the movie and things like that. It just kind of, it got a bit tired after a while. But thumbs up, thumbs down, I give it a thumbs up.
So just to give this a little context, so this was made in 1954. Its budget was 1 million. And it grossed 27 million. So a 27 times multiplier. And those 27 millions are the equivalent of a little over $300 million in current money. Big success at the time. And it's universally beloved by everybody, basically. I do think there is such a thing as the cinephile hive mind, where you're supposed to like certain movies. And if you don't, you just hide your shame, right? You just don't say it out loud, right? I don't remember where this was, but I saw a movie recently where somebody was in film class and everybody gave their favorite movie and every single person said The Godfather. And then one person said something different and the entire class turned on him. And then he said, oh yeah, but The Godfather is like close second or something like that, right? So there is such a thing as having to like a movie if you're into film. So the question is this one of those, right? And I would actually argue it's a little bit better than you guys are giving it credit for because you're watching it 70 years after the fact. So one of the things that's notable in this is that this is supposedly a mystery film, but there is no mystery, right? Jeff witnesses a murder, comes to the right conclusion about what the guy did, tries to expose him, and after some struggles, he does. And everything happened the way he thought, and every doubt or other scenario that the other characters, such as the police officer or the nurse, voice are just not true. Like it's all exactly the way you think. And I have to ask, what's the mystery?
I think the doubts is what kind of like adds to mystery. So you're right, there's no mystery in a sense because it's what you expected it to be, and the outcome is what you expected as well. However, when I was watching it, I was always asking myself, okay, maybe the twist comes here. Okay, the twist didn't come here. Maybe the twist comes here. In a way, you're kind of creating the mystery within yourself, if that makes sense. So you're kind of trying to figure out when the mystery comes, even though there's no mystery, which kind of like adds to the mystery, if that makes sense.
That makes sense because like I think the whole time I was waiting for my expectation to be subverted at some point where, oh, maybe he thinks this is the killer, but actually, he's Mr. Killer that's in another place because like this person looks a little bit more like the stereotype and, he's kind of like overlooked someone else for whatever. Or like I mentioned where I was like getting to the end of the movie, I was like, I just kind of hope he got it wrong. There's like an element of something more interesting kind of going on. I think you kind of hit the nail on the head, Daniel, where it kind of like loses its appeal over time because it just is what it is. Like he like killed his wife, he like dismembered her or like, kind of got rid of her and whatever. And there isn't any kind of shock to it. And I was kind of just waiting to be like, oh, I didn't see that. Or, oh, like they were like a little bit clever with this. And it just kind of wasn't.
I think you're putting words into my mouth a little bit. I do think it's not a mystery because there's no point at which we are learning things together with Jeff, right? There's no twist. There's no shocking reveal. There's no new information revealed in the end. But I think that's just a case of it being in the wrong genre. I think it's very much a thriller. It's just not a mystery movie. And you also, I think, need to put yourself into the perspective of a film goer in 1954. I think one of the things that this movie illustrates is that the kinds of expectations we have of movies today are informed by or are built on the kinds of things that movies like this did. But we are like 6 generations into filmmaking, You know what I mean? Like in the sense of the people who are making movies today, or who made the movies we grew up on, learned from the people who learned from the people who learned from the people who watched Rear Window. See what I mean? Like that is why it feels so basic to us, because that's like the original template. And then everybody else has been iterating and subverting that template. You cannot subvert an expectation if the expectation doesn't exist. And that is why I think a lot of movies like this seem a little bit basic. And if you then go back and you expect like a big twist, like you can imagine twists, right? Like what if the wife was still alive, but they were hiding where she was because she was embarrassed about something? What if she was in the hospital with an embarrassing illness or something like that? Something that in 1950 you had to hide. And that is the twist, right? Like there are things they could have done, but they didn't. They just wanted the idea of what if you witnessed the perfect murder, but you were stuck and you couldn't go solve it yourself and the police wasn't helping you. That's kind of the idea that's being built on here, but it's not what happened or who's the killer or anything like that. So I think that's just I think that's an interesting wrinkle in this. Like if you go into this expecting a mystery, and it sells itself as a mystery, but if you go in expecting that, number one, that just shows that trailers have been lying for 70 years. And so there's nothing new. Secondly, expectations massively color how you experience a movie, right? Because I think if I told, like, I didn't tell you guys anything at all about what this was, other than like the most basic plot, right? As in somebody witnesses a murder. But I think if I had told you it's not about the mystery, like the murder is kind of the inciting incident and it's kind of a framing device, but it's not the story, right? We're not trying to figure out what happened. I actually kind of want to do this experiment again now. Again, find somebody who hasn't seen Rear Window and spoil them completely, and then see what they think about the movie. Because I have a feeling it would be a different answer.
Yeah, I think potentially, and maybe we can kind of get into the dialogue at some point, because obviously if the interest, or I guess at the time the interest is probably there, and it's like probably a little more relatable of looking at your neighbors and like spying your neighbors, and like in today's day and age it's completely different, where we're like on social media and you kind of see everyone's life through social media as opposed to, you know, just what your neighbor's doing and what your neighbors getting up to. You're right, because I'm trying not to be like too harsh on this movie because of like the kind of generational differences in filmmaking, but it just didn't give me anything else. It didn't have like interesting like kind of dialogue or conversation and stuff like that. And again, that's all kind of to do with the timing of it. What you're saying there is like maybe like we would have enjoyed it more if we'd known what was going on. But I'm just like, I'm trying to think, okay, what other things could I have enjoyed in the movie more if I was like less focused on the mystery?
I've got a list.
Let's go.
All right, so I actually do think, like, my big thesis about this movie is that the murder is almost a distraction, right? Like, it certainly sets events in motions, and it's kind of what forms the plot. But in terms of what the movie is about, there's a whole lot other stuff going on, and that is why I think the movie holds up, because that stuff is masterful, in my opinion. I think there's 3 layers to this story. So we've kind of talked about the murder, right? So Jeff is stuck. He's a war journalist. He's or photojournalist. If you pay attention to the pictures he has on his wall and on his desk, he fought in World War II, which was 9 years away at this point, and he talks to, like, the cop is his old war buddy, right? And the two are kind of nostalgic for the good old days of fighting the Japanese or the Germans, or however it was for them. But to them, that was adventure, right? And Jeff has since then had more adventures, right? So one of the pictures that struck me was the picture of a mushroom cloud. And I think that was an atomic test where he photographed that test. There's one of the pictures, and there's other things too about war zones. And, you know, he's been all over. Like, he talks about how Shanghai has seen better days. He's traveled the world. He's been places. He has seen dangerous things. In his conversation with Lisa, he essentially explains to her what his world is like and what she's in for if she wants a life with him. So we've got, just to go back to the layers, we've got the murder, and then we've got the Jeff and Lisa story, which is their relationship and how they've kind of been dating, and she's really into him and he likes her but doesn't think it has a future. And then you've got an allegorical level about how everything that happens in the courtyard and that you witness as you look through the windows of all these different neighbors is just life. So basically each one of the neighbors has something going on, right? So you have Miss Lonely Hearts, right, who is like this middle-aged woman who's trying to date and it's not working out, to the point where she almost commits suicide, like gets very close. You've got kind of this dancer who everybody's kind of spying on because of how attractive she is, but it turns out she's waiting for her boyfriend who's off with the Navy or Air Force or something, and she's just waiting for him to come back. Then you've got the songwriters or the songwriter who has this high-flying social life, but he's kind of struggling to have another hit, right? And then you have the married couple who's arguing, and then like the younger married couple who's arguing about stuff, and you've got the older married couple where the wife ends up being killed. There's just all these different slices of life that Jeff witnesses through the window, and many of them kind of reflect either aspects of his relationship with Lisa or how they might end up. Basically, all the different relationships that he witnesses are possible futures. Like we're getting into Dune territory here, right? Where he witnesses the possible futures, and he could end up like any of them, depending on how he handles Lisa's advances. So that is something that is going on here. And then at the end of the movie, we kind of have a montage where we see all the different neighbors who have moved on to other things, right? So they are not stuck in during the movie, they're at certain stages in their life, and at the end, they're at a different stage, right? So I think the happy married couple is now arguing, and the older married couple that lost their dog have a new dog. And the dancer, who seems to have been alone the entire time, is now welcoming her boyfriend back from overseas, and so on, right? So life goes on, and it changes, but it kind of stays the same. And that happens after Jeff and Lisa get together, and they both make the choice that they want to be together after the events of the movie, right? So I think those are the three different layers. And one of them is very immediate plot focused. The other one is more thematic, which is the Jeff and Lisa story. And then you've got a very, very abstract, allegorical layer of this is what life is like. And Jeff is able to witness all of these different things because he is spying on people through the rear window. And he's looking into their windows and seeing things you're not supposed to see. But in doing so, he gets like this all-seeing perspective of just a cross-section of life.
I can definitely see that. And actually, at face value, I didn't realize that until you said it. I'm like, okay, I can definitely see that. Now, I'm assuming you're not even assuming, you're saying this from a commendable stance. That's what I'm saying for educational purposes. To go back to what I was saying in terms of educational purposes. Well done. That is brilliant, what he's done and what he's conveyed. However, from an entertainment point of view, it's just like, okay, do you know what I'm saying? It's like, okay, I see it, but it didn't really do nothing for me. Do you know what I'm saying? So that's why it's very kind of, I don't know what to do about what you just said from like I said, an entertainment point of view, because that I see it and I hear it, and maybe if I watch it again, it might do something for me, but I don't think it will do something for me because it just felt very slow the way that they captured it. I'm not like an advocate for like background music. I don't mind it. I feel like it can definitely have an effect on the experience depending on the scene and depending on how it's used. However, for a film that's so slow, having no background music, especially a lot of the times when you're watching through, different perspectives, like different windows, it's kind of hard to get into it, especially if there's not much going on. If you're just watching, do you know what I'm saying? There's not much going on. Even there's things going on, like you said, because they're pretty much an allegory for real life. That being said, it's just the way that it was done, like in the manner, because it's not a thriller, so you shouldn't be expecting like chaos. There was times where it was chaotic with the couple, but that's really it. Do you know what I'm saying? The other stuff is just your like normal day in the life type of stuff.
It sounds to me like you're trying to be really nice about it, and you just didn't feel it at all.
I didn't, but like I said, I keep going back to educational purposes. I am going to watch this again to improve my filmmaking, 100%.
I honestly think just like I hadn't even brought up the filmmaking techniques, right? Like how shots are framed and how characters are introduced. I don't want to go into that too much because there's only so many times we can say how brilliant this movie is in terms of how it's shot and whatever. But did you pick on Lisa's introduction?
Not really. Like, even though like there were times where kind of like Jeff would dismiss Lisa's intellect.
Like the very first scene when we see her for the very first time.
At first I thought she was a dream,
Exactly, that's the first step. She's a dreamlike figure that just appears to him. She's like, just so you know, Grace Kelly at the time was pretty much regarded the most beautiful woman in Hollywood. So that is who they cast for the girlfriend. So she's like a dream-like figure that just kind of fades into existence. Kind of the first thing he sees about her is that not only is she beautiful, but she's smiling at him. She looks perfect. She's only interested in him. She asks him questions and actually wants to know the answer. And she's basically throwing herself at him just in a, I want to spend time with you, I want to be in your life kind of thing. So that already is a fantasy, right? That already is like a dreamlike sequence. And that is the introduction. And then their relationship develops as it gets a little bit more complicated, as he basically explains all the reasons for why they can't work out, even though she's basically just saying, and she's also rich, right? So there's no practical hurdle for why they can't be together, but he's convinced that she would not enjoy the kind of life that she would have if she were with him, and therefore he has to reject her, or at least put some distance between them. And so the dreamlike introduction and the more grounded, kind of more practically minded conversation that happens right afterwards, I think, is just a way of not just introducing the character, but is also explaining the thematic underpinning of this is what their relationship is about. And that is where they're both coming from, and that is what their past is, and that is the nature of the conflict they're trying to resolve over the course of the movie, and then they do. So that's just one example. And if you didn't quite pick up on it, just watch that sequence as a clip. It's very apparent if you watch it in isolation. So, and that is just a very deliberate way of framing a character, where within a minute, you know everything you need to know about her, about him, and about their relationship. And you understand what the nature of their disagreement is, even though they have nothing to disagree about. Right? Like everything seems perfect, but still it's not quite right. And that is the nature of their conflict. And over the course of the movie, it gets to the point where they work that out and realize they actually do work well together in ways that have nothing to do with how exciting his life is, or how much money she has, or how expensive her dress is, or how much how much she spends on catering so that he can have a nice dinner when he's stuck in this Greenwich Village apartment, that sort of thing.
Can't lie to you, there was a point where he must have said something, and I was thinking, oh, so is this like a friends with benefits type of situation? I forgot what she said, but then he was like, oh, can't I still see you, or something like that? And then she was like, no, not like this. Or something. It was near when she left. It was near the scene where she left. Yeah, I was like, oh damn, this is how the guys used to kind of like not get down, but this is how they used to ask girls if we could do, friends with benefits. But also, one thing I will say is, when she was introduced, their little kissing scene, I can't lie to you, that felt more authentic than any other kissing scenes I've seen in the films of today. It was, they didn't even need to have clothes off. They had fully clothed, or just a romantic moment. I was thinking, damn, this scene is steamy.
It is still the 50s, right? And I think it would take Hitchcock another 10 years. Like, remember how Psycho started? That was like one level racier, but that was pushing the envelope 10 years later. So in the 50s, you were quite limited in what you could do. But I think they have great chemistry. Like, even though it's quite heightened and stylized in terms of how they talk, but just like their banter and how they relate to each other, I think is very, works within the logic and the tone of the movie. I think it totally works.
I agree.
But, and the reason I'm bringing all of this up is that I think that relationship is the point of the movie. I think like the murder that they're witnessing and how she really gets into it, and he wants to do the right thing, but he's a little bit apprehensive, and she just really gets into it, right? She basically volunteers to break into the apartment, to rummage through all the drawers to find the evidence, right? Or drop off the threatening letter at the neighbor's house. She's gung-ho about it much more than he is. All these conversations they have about being a peeping Tom, and about doing the right thing, and about excitement, and about danger, and all of that. I think all of that is there to elaborate on how these two people approach life, and how they're very different people who come from very different places, but they have this bonding experience throughout the movie, where their handling of the situation of trying to figure out if their neighbor really killed his wife and what to do about it, that is how they become a unit, in my opinion. I don't think that changed all that much. I don't think anybody has like a big hurdle to overcome, like in the sense of a classical character arc. But I do think the change that happens, or the arc that happens, is in their relationship as opposed to in them personally. I think they've just learned how to work together as equals. Right? And remember, this is still 1950s, right? She could have been the girlfriend who kind of sits there and is worried about him getting into danger, and he's the one who has all the adventures. But no, she's right there with him. And I think that is hugely important for this kind of movie and for what it's about.
I was going to say, especially as like the police officer kind of dismissed her. What do you say? These are like female psychological somethings when they were like trying to explain what had happened or what their theories was or whatever. So like you can kind of see how society still probably treated women during the time versus like their actual relationship, and how sort of the dynamic between them was more kind of partners and gave her a little bit more agency than what she might have had elsewhere in that type of situation.
And I do think there's a little bit more to that, where he asks her for evidence and she says woman's intuition. And then he turns that idea on her, right? Where he basically says there's no room for woman's intuition in men's work, that kind of thing. So it is what you're saying, but it's also a little bit more where she tries to skirt around having to convince him by saying, "Oh, just trust me," and he says, "I don't trust you."
Can we talk about the flashbulb scene? I've been waiting to talk about this scene for the longest. The scene at the end of the camera flashbulb scene where the guy in the wheelchair kept on flashing the camera, blinding the intruder, the murderer.
Yeah, so the neighbor kind of gets into the apartment, and Jeff had like a bunch of like flashbulbs, and he just keeps blinding the guy like 4 times, and the guy just keeps walking into it.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention how crazy that was. I was like, yo, it was laughable. I'll be honest with you. I was like, it was shit, but good shit, if that makes sense, because it was like funny. I don't know what his intention behind that. To be fair, it's that is the 50s, cool, but yeah, it was shit, but it was funny type of shit. So I was glad that I saw that.
I do like that he used his skill set to actually try to tackle the situation, because he was kind of helpless, to be fair. He had like a broken leg, he was stuck in a wheelchair, and he couldn't really do much. So it was good that he kind of like turned to what he knew, as opposed to, I don't know, turning into an action hero on one leg and like, you know, getting something and like tricking him or whatever. So even though the scene was a little bit stupid, because at a certain point you just like probably cover your eyes, especially after the second time, you probably just cover your eyes.
The guy kept on walking.
Just kept walking into it and kept being blinded by it. It was so stupid, but I did like that aspect.
It's a little bit like it's not a compelling action sequence, right?
It was needed for
Even
me,
like-
though.
Yeah, and even within the logic of a 1950s movie, like after the second time you cover your eyes. There's also other things too, right? Like when, I don't forget if Jeff screams for help or if kind of the commotion just makes noise. I think it's when he's dangling from the windowsill, right? And the neighbors see him and they run to help him, and for some reason the frame rate speeds up.
Yeah, that was so weird. I mean, plus the CGI on him falling. Obviously, it's in 1954, so I'm not gonna like, you know.
Yeah, it's not CGI. It's like split screen or some like however it's done. Probably against I don't know if green screens. Like it's like a composite image, right? He was not really falling, but it just doesn't look real, right? And that kind of like my thing is like, if the technology isn't there to make a scene work, maybe shoot it differently. I don't know. See him let loose off the windowsill and he drops, and then the next scene is him hitting the floor or something. Like you can shoot that in 1954. The shot of him falling down to the ground wasn't probably necessary, and it's a bit janky, and it's just not that compelling. And it's weird because I think the rest of the movie looks so good. There's this whole thing about how the entire thing is shot from one room, and even when, for instance, Lisa goes to drop off like the threatening letter in Thorwald's apartment, we don't follow her with the camera, right? We stay with Jeff the entire time, right? And there's 2 camera angles basically, which is looking into the apartment to look at him and whoever he's talking to, or looking outside to look at the neighbors. Those are the 2 camera angles you get in this movie. And then in the end, they break that rule and make it just like, they don't even build on that or play with that idea, which seems like it could have been a little bit more effective. I don't know. But like, I'm sure Hitchcock had his reasons, but I don't think the final result really holds up all that much. I have no excuse about the frame rate. That's just weird. So yeah, any other thoughts about the Jeff Lisa story? Because first of all, do you agree that this is what the movie is about and that is where the appeal is? If you just strip away everything else, did their relationship work for you? Was that interesting? Or was that just filler?
I think they definitely had good chemistry between the two of them. And I think like once you kind of explain how the neighbors kind of tie into their story as well, you can, you know, definitely see that it's more their story than anything else. Whether it drives the interest of the movie or not, I think it's just like a sort of time difference thing, where at the time, you know, you probably get a little bit more from it versus kind of viewing it 70 odd years later. It definitely works, and you know, there's definitely good chemistry, especially because they don't look like they even should be dating. Like you said, this is a, you know, supermodel, or like what was deemed to be, you know, the most beautiful woman at the time. You can definitely see that she's like very attractive. And he just, I don't know, he just seemed old. He just seemed like he was like older than her for whatever while viewing it. And I don't know what the age difference is in real life, but he just seemed like he was a little bit more mature. So it was like an odd match, but you could definitely buy into their story, and you can definitely buy into something kind of what was going on there. But in terms of like it driving a strong interest in the film, not so much. And sort of maybe if it was like redone, it would probably be done slightly differently. Maybe not. Maybe it's not needed.
So I just looked it up, and Grace Kelly was 21 years younger than James Stewart. Honestly, like she's attracted to his experience and the kind of life he lives, right? And he's attracted to her free spirit and her drive, basically. Like, I don't even think he's in it for the money or because of how she looks. I think, honestly, my impression was that he's attracted to how independent and forceful and driven she is. Like, the entire time she's harassing him, right, about all sorts of things, and he never seems to mind. Like, she just shows up with catering and whatever else, right? Like, it's not something that seems to bother him. Even though when he's talking to the nurse, I think he says very clearly that he thinks men and women don't get along or something to that effect, or relationships never work or something like that. But there's a reason why he's still with her, even though he thinks it can't work out long term, right?
And I mean, he's the one that's kind of trying to put the distance in between them, or trying to like drive a little bit of, not drive a wedge, but like just like kind of like keep her arm's distance, just because he's like, as like an actual partner, like I couldn't see it working because you probably wouldn't fit into my lifestyle, and I can't give you what you're after and whatever.
Did none of that really work for you? Like, were you not interested in whether these two crazy kids will make it work?
Not really. I was distracted by the murder mystery. I was distracted by what was going on over there, and like if there was anything interesting there. Not that I didn't care. It just wasn't my focus.
You felt it got in the way of the murder mystery?
Well, I mean, there isn't really a murder mystery per se, anyways.
You didn't know that at the time, right? You thought, oh, we're here for the murder mystery, but they keep talking about their feelings. Can we like, is that it?
The moments I was enjoying the movie most is when we were just seeing other people, because I was waiting for something interesting to happen with like someone else, and like for there to be some type of twist elsewhere. So like while they're talking, and this is what I was saying about like the dialogue, and like was there really anything there? And obviously like what's really there is like their relationship and how it's developing and how it's sort of changing. But I was a bit like, okay, like we're probably talking too much. We're kind of talking too much, and I'm not really getting anything out of it. I just want to see, okay, like, you know, can we talk about like what's happening elsewhere, like what's happening, you know, with the lonely neighbor, what's happening with sort of the odd couple with the dog or whatever, is kind of where I was like trying to go.
Do you think it would be different if you saw it again?
Potentially. I have no plans to watch this ever again, to be honest. I've seen it. It's all good. It's done. I don't think I plan to see it again. Would it be different? Maybe.
Now that you know what's important and what it's really about, and what is window dressing and what is kind of the real core of the movie.
You know me, I care a lot about like story and character work. So I think probably yes, it'd give me a different perspective on the characters. It'd give me a different perspective on sort of their dynamic and their relationship, and there'd probably be more talking points, or more like things that I'd like be able to like pull out and like say about the relationship if I'd like focused on that a little bit more while watching it. And of course, this was kind of like a first time watch, so you know it was kind of advertised as like the murder mystery aspect of it. But like I said, there's interesting things going on there, and there's like definitely conversations to be had from their relationship. It's just that it was just like breezing past me, not going over my head, but it just kind of wasn't sticking with me on initial watch. So maybe second time around they probably would.
Because I do think this is a case of expectations matter. I think this is also known as the murder mystery, right? Like a guy like witnesses a neighbor commit a murder, and then what does he do? Had you ever seen a spoof of this? Because this is one of the most spoofed movies that probably exist.
No, I don't think. Name one, because I don't think I've seen one.
The Simpsons did a famous one where Bart breaks his leg and he's stuck inside all summer, and he sees something that leads him to believe that Flanders killed his wife. He and Lisa do the whole thing about sneaking into the house and watching through the window and trying to convince other people that something is going on, and nobody believes them. Then it turns out that what is it, Maud? Is it Marge? Not Marge. Is it Maud Flanders? Is on holiday or was visiting family or something like that. It's been a cool 20 years since I saw that episode. But that is the part that they spoof, right? And it's all about your neighbor is a murderer and you have a broken leg, so you can't physically do anything, but you can only watch and you see everything. What do you do? That's the part that gets spoofed. And there's others too. Pretty much every sitcom has spoofed this at some point, all sorts of shows. Hang on, there's like a list of examples here. There's a CSI episode. There's Pretty Little Liars apparently did a spoof of this. Pretty much any show that runs long enough eventually spoofs Rear Window. But they don't spoof the thing about the relationship. They don't spoof the thing about two people who want to be together but think they can't, and they learn how to make it work. Like, that's not something that's really spoofable. And so the story is known for things that I don't think are really the core of the movie. And you guys hadn't seen those, and so you're going in without any expectations at all. But I do think that if somebody had seen those and expected that to be the movie, it would be a surprise, at least in terms of how the movie is not quite what you expect. I'm always happy when I get to compare a movie to Exorcist, and that's kind of the same way, where I had seen all the different spoofs and imitations of Exorcist for years and years before I actually saw it, and then the actual movie is completely different. It's not about the same thing, and the bulk of the movie is about character stuff as opposed to driving out the devil, right? There's other movies too that are similar like this, and I think this is another one where the thing it's known for is not really what it's about. And people think they know what it's about if they haven't seen it, but they're wrong.
Isn't that a common thing in like quite a lot of movies? I feel like we've like, I don't know, discussed it quite a few times, even with like modern movies where like people kind of take the wrong impression or take the wrong thing from a movie when it's actually not about that at all. And I can't, like, it's not coming to me any examples off the top of my head, but I feel like we've like discussed it in several movies that we've discussed through the year.
I think there's 2 or 3 where that's the case. And I think a lot of the time when a movie is famous for something, that's actually what the movie is about. Like Jurassic Park really is about dinosaurs getting loose in an amusement park. Here it's very, very different. Here it's almost just the setup, but the actual story is completely different. So I just find that interesting because honestly, I had not really picked up on this before I rewatched this for the conversation, because I knew the relationship was in there, but I thought it was more even balanced. But now that I've watched again, and this is like I've seen this a few times, but in my head it was like it had a similar approach of the murder mystery is the interesting part, and they also talk about their relationship a bunch. But that's just what movies do. But the movie is really about getting justice for the killed wife. And this time around, I had a very different experience where I kind of realized the murder is just kind of an inciting incident. And it's what kind of sparks the character arc for the relationship and how the relationship develops. And that also explains why the ending is kind of lame, right? Where they just arrest him and he just shows them where he disposed of the body. And there's no surprises, no twist. Like, isn't that a lame ending? And isn't Hitchcock supposed to be this master storyteller? But I think the ending is not they catch the killer. The ending is they get together. And then, like, the actual punchline is when he's asleep and he has 2 broken legs this time. They're even further removed from the status quo or from normalcy, but she sticks with him anyway. And then she's reading a book about exploring Tibet. And then when she's sure he's fallen asleep, she brings out the fashion magazine. Do you pick up on that? It's the last shot of the movie. So talking about endings, right? And talking about how an ending is kind of the exclamation mark at the end of the joke. Like, I think that is it, right? Like, they are together and they are trying to make it work, and they are clear about what the relationship is about and what it's going to be like. And she's going to keep one foot in her old life as well, right? She doesn't give up her agency or her personality or anything like that to be with him. It's both, right? And she's going to have both because she's Lisa Fremont. And I think that she doesn't even say anything. Like, I think in the final shot, there's no dialogue at all. It's just her facial expression and her act of kind of switching between the book and the fashion magazine that are representatives of the 2 worlds that they live in.
When you reapply the context to it, it's like it's a good ending, and it's like kind of shows the compromise and the willingness to show an interest and, like, you know, do for the other person to kind of make it work.
It's not even compromise, right? She's still like, it's both. Her life is going to be 50-50, both of those things. And she's probably going to drag him to high society events from now on as well. And he's going to make the best of it. That's not stated, but that's kind of the flip side of that.
I had like a question like about like 5 minutes ago when you was going on your rant, but I was gonna ask like whether you think it was intentional, but actually no, it definitely feels intentional. It feels intentional, like what he's kind of done with, especially with the ending and stuff like that.
I think it is 100% intentional, and I think it is notable that is the last scene, right? Like, the killer being caught is not the last scene. A lot of the time we will talk about how like an ending doesn't end when the story, like a movie doesn't end when the story ends, and here it ends where the story ends. And so it has nothing to do with the killer. The killer is already gone. It's already long past. Life has moved on. The world has moved on. The only thing I would add to this is he should have had like a suit like hanging on the shelf behind him for the next time she drags him to a high society event. And in return, she reads the book to get ready about hiking through the Himalayas. Like that would have been more like cleaner symmetry. But that's the only thing I would change about that last sequence.
This might be a bit of a reach, but isn't that a reflection, that the end scene, a reflection of what, society was like for women back in the day?
But everything Lisa does and says is in opposition to that. She is not somebody who gives up her personality for her guy.
Well, that's the thing, because it was kind of like an evolution to her character, because she starts off as a socialite in a way, and then evolves into like a partner in crime. But the partner in crime is kind of like a deception, because she is a partner in crime to kind of like prove herself to the guy that she wants. And I think that's the perception that the guy has now, is that, oh, she's actually no. I think he still believes that she's still the adventurous girl that's going out in fashion and stuff. But he also can see that she's also capable of being his partner in crime. So kind of like opposite worlds can not only attract, but they can work in unison. So I was going to say in a way she kind of deceived him, but she didn't really. Even though that scene does give that she in a way is kind of like deceiving him, because she's reading that book thinking he's awake, and then when she looks and sees that he's not awake, she'll switch the book for what she really likes, which is the whole fashion magazine.
There's certainly a subtext of that there. But I don't know, maybe it's more like she promised she would read the book or something like that. And so she does it while he's looking. So I don't know. But I just don't think that she's the kind of person who would give up her personality, because number one, she's always the instigator, right? Like he's the observer and she's the doer. Like that's one of the differences between them. He's a journalist, he's a photographer, he documents things, he observes them, but she does things. So every time they are in disagreement about how to deal with the murderer, he wants to watch and she wants to do something. And he even tries to talk her out of it, and she just ignores him and does what she thinks she wants to do, or what she wants to do, or what she thinks she should do. And he's constantly objecting out of concern for her safety, because he's supposed to be the protector in a way, but he can't protect her, especially not if she goes out into these adventures, right? In the context of everything else she's done, like she's always the instigator of doing what she wants to do. And he's always the one urging caution and wanting to wait and see and that sort of thing. So it is not like he's dragging her into anything. If anything, it's the opposite.
I can agree to that. She definitely seems like someone that wouldn't be a different person for someone. Well, she is doing that as well. But like you say, it wouldn't be in like, she wouldn't sacrifice her own self to be someone else, to be with someone. So she'll kind of like show that she can still work with her partner, as well as still being her. She can basically make the relationship work, is what I'm trying to say.
This might be the first time that we've had a conversation and it's actually turned me off of the movie completely. It's like the more that we talk about it, and the more that we are kind of discussing this relationship, the more I'm like, my God,
so what?
I don't know, like, yeah, it's kind of, and again, it might be I need to rewatch it and whatever, but the more I'm just like, it just didn't really like, I can appreciate like, when there's like kind of like clever writing or there's kind of an underlying sort of message behind it, but honestly, like, you kind of go to the movies to be entertained, and none of it really kind of screams entertaining to me at all. Watching it, discussing it, or anything like that, I'm just like, it's just not for me. I would say, I think I've actually kind of concluded by the end of this conversation that it's just one of those ones where we watched it, I couldn't put it on the same level of like other classics that we've watched. Like, there's other movies that we've done, pre-2000s, as we kind of talk of as classic movies, where I see the appeal and I can see sort of why it was done well, and I can kind of overall get a good sense of sort of the movie, the mass appeal and this and the other. This one I just don't. I honestly just don't see it. It's ended up being a big miss for me.
So it talked you out of appreciating Rear Window?
Yeah, you might have with like all that kind of like focus on the relationship and the dynamics around it and stuff. I'm just like, it's just not entertaining, or it's not done in an entertaining way. And like, I'll give it the benefit of the doubt for being from 1954, but I don't think I'll touch this one again.
Normally, that's not my go-to kind of movie, right? Like, if like show me a movie where people talk about, like, there's this movie, what is it called, Love Story, where Adam Driver and Scarlett Johansson sit in a room for 2 hours and talk about their feelings. never gonna watch that movie. I'm sure it's really well written, really well acted, never gonna watch it. So there are certain types of movies you're just not into. And this is not why I recommend the movie, or that's not why I watched it, or that is not why I think it's necessarily a great movie. But I think as you watch it, I think the mystery kind of fades into the background, and the thing that really steals the show is kind of their relationship, right? And how they deal with it, and the dialogue. I think just the dialogue is just a joy to watch, and that's just taste, right? Like if you're not into it, then you're not into it. But I think it's just really well written and tightly. It's a tight script, and there's all the ways in which it's just three people in a room talking, right? Like that's the bulk of the movie, and I think it just works. It's like the dialogue is snappy and it drives the story forward. It doesn't repeat itself all that much. Like the characters actually do evolve, even though they're not going anywhere. Like physically, they're staying in the same place, but just by talking about what they're seeing and what they're experiencing and how they react to it, they go on a journey, in my opinion. And so I think that is why it kind of holds up, and that I think that is why it's enjoyable to watch, even if you don't know the mystery, and even if you know that the mystery is kind of basic, as in there isn't really a mystery. Like the characters just figure it out after like 20 minutes, and then nothing substantially changes. So as a mystery movie, I think it's pretty poor. Basically as a play, I think it's really strong.
Yeah, I think, definitely a tasting, I'd say.
Anything else we want to say about Rear Window, or shall we wrap it up?
I've said all that I can think of.
You kind of answered this already, but does this go on the shelf?
Not quite for me. Not on the same level of like, things like Psycho or Alien or anything that kind of came after it. Sometimes like when you say like, does it go on the shelf? It's like, would I like pull it out to like show it to someone and be like, oh, like we should check this movie out? Probably not. And like, would I pick it out for myself to rewatch again? Probably not as well, unfortunately. Maybe different for Jonathan, because like, he's into like the movie making, the writing and stuff like that, so maybe you'll like have a different perspective. But for someone that just like wants some entertainment, some good stories with some like good characters and a good plot that I can kind of like follow through as well, and like, see some twists and turns, this just doesn't quite deliver what I'm looking for.
It wouldn't go on my shelf of movies to watch. It would go on my shelf for movies to study.
This has been on my shelf for a number of years. I'm not even that much of a cinephile. I don't love all Hitchcock movies. There's some that are quite the slog, and I think this is one of the good ones. I actually do think the story and character are the attraction here, but it's just not the mystery, right? It is, you put these characters into a situation and you watch them react to it, and that then has ramifications for how they relate to each other and how they view the world and what decisions they make. Those are all the ingredients towards a good story, and if you then filter that through a well-written, tight script, you get something that's quite enjoyable, and I do enjoy watching this. So I do think once you calibrate your expectations a little bit and pay attention to the right things, and don't want a mystery with twists and turns, but rather a character study of what do characters have to say, or how do characters react to being in that kind of situation, I think it's quite strong, and I think it has held up. And that's just independent of, is this a well-made movie, to which the answer, I think, is also yes. If you're interested in the filmmaking of it, I think there's absolutely stuff to learn here and stuff to appreciate, but I'm in it for the story and the characters, and I think those deliver.
Hi guys, thank you very much for tuning into today's episode.
If you've made it this far, if you liked what you've heard, please tell a friend. And if you hated everything we've said, please tell an enemy.
Hi guys, we're at the Eye of the Storm podcast, and we will catch you next time. Au revoir.
Bye-bye.